titled Ties to Tehran, South Africa's Democracy and its Relationship with Iran. And it's released by the Middle East Africa Research Institute. Now, this report has highlighted that South Africa's close ties with Iran threaten the country's economic stability as well as its diplomatic standing in the world. The report says even though the commercial and strategic ties between the two countries remain robust, the concerns about sanctions evasion as well as financial greylisting do remain. To break this down further, we're joined on the line by Benji Shulman, the Executive Director of the Middle East Africa Research Institute. A very warm welcome to you. Good to have you with us on Africa in Business.
Thank you so much. Good to be with you guys.
Perhaps a good starting point would be for you if you could kindly just paint an idea and a picture of us, of the background on South Africa's relationship with Iran.
Yeah, so the relationship with Iran is very old. It really starts in the way that we understand it in 79 with the Islamic Revolution in Iran. And that brings to power the Ayatollah regime, which does two things simultaneously. The one is that it really embraces the liberation movements on the continent, provides funds and provides rhetorical support, armaments, all that sort of thing. And at the same time, below the radar, is trading oil for weapons with the apartheid regime. But it means that by the end of apartheid in the 90s, it's in a position to then take advantage of its relations with the liberation struggles and groups, in particular the ANC, and to build into that very strong state relations that sort of start in the 90s and get stronger as we sort of go forward up until today.
And you've put together this report titled Ties to Tehran, South Africa's Democracy and its Relationship with Iran. Why was it important to actually scrutinize this relationship?
So it's important because for two reasons. First of all, as South Africa, we have a constitution, a liberal democracy, and that enshrines a certain approach not just to our domestic affairs but also to our foreign affairs, and that is very much not in play when you look at the values and way in which the Iranian Islamic Republic actually operates. It has none of the values of what South Africa has. It is discriminatory of cultural groups, religious groups. It dissenters, political people, gay and lesbian rights, for example. All of these are crushed by this regime, and so it doesn't share any of the values that we share as a country. So when that happens, typically it means that there's something else at play. So, for example, with China, we don't necessarily share all the same values as China, but we have a big trade relationship. But in the case of Iran, we don't even have that. So here we don't have a big trade relationship. We don't have a values-based relationship. And so the question was, well, what's really driving this? And more importantly, what is the costs of us maintaining this relationship, given that we get neither a trade support nor a value support by doing so?
And a very interesting question, and I wonder what the conclusion was. In the absence of a trade or economic benefit, in the absence of shared values, what did this relationship become distilled to?
So really, I think it boils down to two things, right? We know that that there's an ideological affinity between the ANC and the Ayatollahs, a sort of, if you like, anti-imperialist idea about how to operate in the world, and so they share that. And then also, we can sort of presuppose from some of the things that we detail in the report that there may also be kind of a financial relationship between the ANC and Iran in some respects. So we feel like those are the two big elements that are driving that agenda.
We saw South Africa becoming a huge advocate for Iran to be a member state of the BRICS bloc of countries. Talk to us about, obviously they've been successful in that, but how has Iran been received within BRICS?
Yes, I think that's really where South Africa plays an important role for Iran. You know, Iran doesn't have a lot of allies in the world in a very strong sense. It's connected to China, with Russia, with North Korea. None of these are necessarily countries that have shiny diplomatic credentials. And South Africa, what it provides is this sort of democratic, liberal country that is really open to anyone, and it gives them an entree into the international community. And I think that's the role that we played here in BRICS. There was some dissension in BRICS about expanding the bloc in the first place. Not all the countries wanted to do it. But because of South Africa's intervention, Iran was, I think, allowed in. And that, I think, has changed the way in which BRICS operates. In general, it's not the same kind of 4 or 5 countries that we saw at the beginning. It now has a kind of larger base and has a different number of countries in it. So and it depends really. I think the problem with BRICS has always been like the bilateral between different countries. So China and India, for example, don't always get on in a bilateral position, but they get on in a BRICS position. And I think Iran has a similar kind of frictional effect inside BRICS, in which people now have to accommodate this country, which they don't necessarily get on with, but now are inside the BRICS framework.
Let's look at reactions from the BRICS countries regarding the military strikes on Iran and the increasing tension there. How has BRICS reacted to this?
Yeah, I think that's been interesting, particularly Russia and China. India has not really been part of this, and Brazil is far away. But I think one might have expected that Russia and China would have more actively come to Iran's aid during during the fighting. What we saw instead was that Russia was a little bit preoccupied in what's doing in Ukraine, and that China played a role to sort of refill some weapons programs and systems that the Iranians were lacking, but nothing in an offensive nature. So they were kind of hung out to dry a little bit in that confrontation. But afterwards, I think they received sort of more support from BRICS countries.
Let's focus a bit on some of the diplomatic or economic implications of this relationship between Iran and South Africa, as well as South Africa's continued relations with Iran. How does this affect the relations with the United States and other Western partners?
Yeah, so I think we're seeing that immediately at the moment. The most obvious at the moment has to do with Ngubeni Jonas, who was the special envoy, or is the special envoy to the United States from South Africa. And we've seen reports in the last week saying that basically he wasn't really given a diplomatic visa. He hasn't been there. He's not been doing any work. And this, it would seem, has to do with his relationship with MTN. In 2012, MTN was a bidder for a cell phone license inside Iran, and it won rather at the expense of a group called Turkcell. And since then, there's been a continued issue within international courts trying to sort out if this allegation that MTN was involved with some sort of bribery and corruption can actually be legally dealt with. And what we've seen in the last few months is that South African courts may actually take this on as a case. It's before the Constitutional Court to look at and to see whether in fact MTN did some sort of wrongdoing here. And that has important political implications with our relationship with the United States, because some of the allegations is that the IRGC, the Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps, which does a lot of offensive actions, may have been able to get technology via MTN, which would have been used on American citizens, which is very important, and that the person who was the chairman of MTN at the time is now President Cyril Ramaphosa. So all of this stuff is I think one of the things that the Americans are looking at. We focus on the Afrikaner issue and the land issue, whatever, but actually Iran is another one of these issues which we sort of need to solve if we want to have a good relationship with the United States again.
Certainly a report worth interrogating and going into. Benji Shulman, thank you very much for giving us just an overview of the contents thereof. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for your time. Have a great day.
You have a great one too. Benji Shulman is the Executive Director of the Middle East Africa Research Institute, and talking there towards the end around MTN Iran Cell. You'll remember that particular case. It is a joint venture between Iranian shareholders and South Africa's MTN Group. And you'll remember that MTN Iran Cell reportedly acquired U.S. networking equipment, and this was despite sanctions raising concerns over compliance as well as tech access under those restrictions. So yet another controversy, this time in the area of business between the two countries and their relations with the United States. It's exactly 23 minutes on.